Hello and welcome to the channel, and in this week's video we're going to talk about Perun Mosfets. A few weeks ago I had the chance to visit Perun Mosfets in Poland when I was on a holiday there, and they were kindly enough to give me a tour of their facility. Now, I am new to all that electronic stuff that you put in your rifles, but it was also the perfect time to understand why people put it in their rifle, because I never did it. Well, I have a few laying around, but I never really took a dive into the electronics of an airsoft rifle. And in this video I want to go over a few different parts of my trip to Perun Mosfets. First of all, I want to talk about the company itself. What is Perun? What do they do? Then I want to talk about the different MOSFETs they have. I have a few right here, so I'm going to talk about that. I'm also going to show you how a MOSFET is made. I'm going to explain the different steps in the process, and I will also give you a little bit more information about how I'm going to use the MOSFETs that I have right here in front of me. Now, first up, the company. Now, Perun was founded in 2016 when two brothers had the idea that they wanted to create a MOSFET. And those two brothers started to work together and they created a MOSFET. And after the first creation of that MOSFET, they kept improving that MOSFET, and it was starting to lead somewhere. Now, many years later and a lot of MOSFETs later, Perun has established themselves as a well-known brand that makes MOSFETs, and not only for the V2 and the V3 gearboxes, but also for other different rifles that doesn't have any standard MOSFETs going. And there's also the option to go DIY and use one of their MOSFETs to make something completely your own, and I'm going to talk about that later. When I talk to the guys from Perun, you can see the pride that they have with their product, and they have every right to be proud, because what they have created with those two brothers is an amazing company, and you can feel when you walk into that room that there is a lot of passion for their product and what they have created. Now, I had an amazing time at Perun Mosfets, and I want to thank everybody that made it possible for me to be there, do the shots, and give me a lot of information about MOSFETs. Now, when we browse the website of Perun, we can see a lot of different MOSFET, and I'm going to go over what you see on the website. Now, we have the V2 hybrid. That is the MOSFET that fits in most V2 gearboxes. You have them front and rear wired, and they fit in almost every gearbox. And yes, they are ICS compatible, which is really important for me because I use a lot of ICS rifles. There is also the V3 hybrid, and that is for all your AK lovers or UMP lovers. That is the one that fits in the V3 gearbox. It has the same functionality as a V2, it's just a different type of gearbox. And as I said, they also have some special MOSFETs for special rifles, and one of those rifles is the Vector. They have a special MOSFET that fits right into the Vector. Now, I don't have the option to install that because I don't have a Vector, so yeah, I'm not going to be able to make a video about that. But they have it, and you can install it yourself. Now, the MOSFET that goes into the Vector doesn't have the same functionalities as the hybrid MOSFETs have. So there is difference between the types of MOSFETs. Like the hybrids have a little bit more functionalities, and the other ones are your basic MOSFETs with some basic things you can change on it. Now, the next MOSFET that we have is the ETU++, and that is the MOSFET that you can use in every G&G rifle that has the G&G MOSFET in it. It's a plug-and-play MOSFET that you can just take out the G&G MOSFET and you can put in the ETU++, and that will give you a little bit more functionality, and it's also a little bit smaller, so you'll have more room for your battery. And then the next one is a special one that I'm really a fan of because you can do almost everything with it. It's a MOSFET that you can go wild, and if you have a special rifle, this is the MOSFET that you want. And that is the Perun AB++. And I'm going to use that in this. I have been working on this for 11 years, or maybe longer, and I'm gonna finish it one day. So this is the M1919A4. Yeah, I have been working on it for a real long time, and now I have a MOSFET that goes with it, or that I can use for it. So I'm really curious on how that will go. And this is what I mean with special project rifles. If you have something on the pipeline that you want to create or something, AB++ is the MOSFET for you. And then the last MOSFET is a simple MOSFET that will protect your trigger contacts, and that is an inline, really tiny MOSFET that will just go into your buffer tube or whatever you have space to put that little thing in there. It's nothing fancy, but it does what it's made for. Now, during the years that I have been playing Airsoft, I have gotten in contact with different kind of MOSFETs, and I had a love-hate relationship with them. Some were good, some were not good. I heard a lot of people having troubles with them, and then I tried it myself, and it was, yeah, I don't know. I didn't have like an epiphany, and it was like, oh, this is great. So with these, this might change, and that's why I'm really curious to try them out and see how they work. Now, I was afraid if you put an electronic piece, like a really small piece, in your gearbox where the gears are spinning a really high, like there's really fast spinning metal thingies in your gearbox, and then you put a MOSFET next to it and the grease is everywhere, and that will come on your PCB. And I was like, this is going to break my gun, and then when I'm on the field, my gun will break because I have an electronic part in it. And I was like, let's keep it simple. The less you put in it, the less it can break, right? So that was my philosophy. But maybe I have to change that a little bit. So let's see. Now, another thing is that when I play in the rain with my rifles, yes, I play in the rain, they get wet. And I have no idea how the electronics are going to behave when they get wet. So yeah, that's also a really interesting thing that I'm going to find out. Another thing that I didn't like about electronic MOSFETs is the trigger pull. When you have a normal standard AEG rifle, you can pull your trigger and you can pull it all the way, and at some point your rifle is going to shoot. But a lot of the new MOSFETs, there is like the electronic push button that is at the end of the trigger, and I just don't like it. It's like you can pull your trigger, you don't feel any resistance at all. You can pull the trigger and then you can just feel that electronic button at the end saying click. And I hate it. It's like, it doesn't feel right anymore. And that's why I stayed away from every MOSFET that had that trigger contact in it, because I don't like it. Now with the IR stuff, that might be a little bit different. Again, I will have to try it out. And also there is a new thing with the magnetic stuff, a really innovative stuff that I have never heard of. So I'm really curious on everything that is going to be in my rifle when I'm done with installing it in my rifle. And then the last thing why I didn't put any MOSFETs in my rifles is because I'm an ICS captain, and if I want to give an opinion about the rifle, I want to give that opinion about the stock rifle. Now, I don't want you to buy a rifle when you tried one of my rifle and they are already upgraded. No, I want to give you an honest opinion about how the stock rifle is going to get to you when you open up the box. If I put in a MOSFET and I put a lot of upgrades in it, it's not a stock rifle anymore, and it's basically not an ICS rifle anymore. Now, I have said a few things that I didn't like about MOSFETs, but MOSFETs also have really good stuff, like active brake that will prevent your motor from overspinning, or pre-cocking that will give you a really fast trigger pull on your first shot. Or in some cases, depending on the MOSFET, you will be able to set up burst fire, 2 rounds, 5 rounds, 3 rounds, whatever that is MOSFET is possible to do, or depending on the MOSFET. You can change the length of the trigger pull in some MOSFETs. You can really have a short trigger, you can have a really amazing long trigger depending on what you want. So there are tons of possibilities that you can play with your rifle if you have a MOSFET installed. And you can even reduce the round per second that you shoot just by tweaking your MOSFET. And besides all the fun stuff that I just mentioned, it will also protect your battery from going too deep and too low. That will destroy your battery, and will also protect your trigger contacts from dying. And in some MOSFETs you also have a resettable fuse, which is really interesting. If you short your rifle at some point, you can just press the button and you can go again. So yes, it is time to put in some MOSFETs in my rifles, and of course I will make videos about the placing of the MOSFETs. I will do a pre and after the installation. I will try to document it as well as possible, so you understand what I did to my rifle and why I did it and what the changes are. And of course you will be able to find all those videos on my channel, so if you don't want to miss that, consider subscribing to the channel. Now, one more thing that I want to say about the MOSFET is that it changes your rifle. Like, you can have a standard M4 rifle like this one. You can have a standard M4 rifle, and you can use this for milsim purposes, and you can change this up with a MOSFET. You can put a delay on it if you want to make a DMR out of it. But also interesting is that if you want to go to speedsoft or whatever, where people shoot really fast, you can just change your settings of your MOSFETs, and you can use the same rifle for indoor play where they shoot higher volume of BBs or faster volume of BBs. You can just change the trigger pull depending on your play style. And this is really interesting. So you can buy one platform, and especially with the ICS rifles, you can just buy one lower receiver, put a MOSFET in there, and you can change the settings of the MOSFET depending on the upper receiver that you're using. You can use a DMR platform, you can use the really stubby one where you can just go to a CQB game. And this is what makes a MOSFET interesting. On the fly, you can change the settings of your rifle depending on what game you're going to play. Now, how are those MOSFETs made? And that was a really interesting process to follow. And I will try to explain all the steps in this part of the video. And if you have any questions about a few steps, just post it in the comments and I will try to answer them as fast as possible. I will try to reach out to the Perun guys if there are really difficult questions for me. Now, when they get the boards in, they do an inspection of the boards, and after that inspection, they put it under a stencil where they can apply the soldering paste. And after that is done, they put that board into an inspection machine, and that's the newest addition to their small factory that they have there. And they inspect every little thing that happened in the stencil thing. When that is approved, they move up to the next step. And after that, it will go to the picking machine. And that picking machine is picking up all the different components and putting it on different boards. And I love those little machines that are like jeep, 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 jeep. I just love it. And it was amazing to see how fast that machine was and how precise that machine was, because those components are really small. But even with the machine being really precise, they want to do that like super quality check, and they do a manual quality check for every board. And they move up the parts to be 100% correct. And this shows how they are involved in the quality of their product and how passionate they are about the stuff that they're making. Now, the components stick to the board because of that special solution that was added in the first step, and that makes sure that the parts are still a little bit movable. But after they bake it, it sticks to the board, and then the board is ready for the next step. And this is the end of the small MOSFET board, but that's not the end of the MOSFET. Now, they also have a machine that is able to cut wires at an amazing speed, and it was also, again, really cool to see. And they can also put different cuts in the wire depending on how they set it up. And after the cables are stripped, they're putting it in a different machine, and they use a machine that clamps the connectors on it, and it's not soldered on, because that gives a better connection. And also, if you solder a cable, it will harden a little bit and it will get stiffer, and that means that it's easier to break. With that stamping machine, your cables will last longer. And after all the machinery, it was time to do some manual soldering, and you can see how precise all these little parts are soldered, and they have some amazing tools to keep everything in place, because I was always wondering how they connect some of the parts of the MOSFET with a machine. Well, they don't. They use manual labor to do that. And after all the machines have done their work and all the manual labor is done, it's time to polish it, put it in a package, and make it ready for shipping. And the box that you can see here right in front of me, it's a really basic box, and this is something that I really like. It's a basic but beautiful box, and the focus is on the component that is inside. Now, in most boxes, there are the same things. There is your MOSFET with the cables attached. There is the playing card with how to put your settings on your rifle with your trigger and other buttons. There is, in the hybrids, there is the magnetic little part. And in some cases, you can also find some stickers. And when everything is done, the box is ready to ship out for you to buy. Next up is, what will I do in the future with those MOSFETs? Now, I will put the version 2 in my ICS, my first ICS rifle that I ever bought. It's a really old one. I think it's around 9 years old. It has a MOSFET inside, but I don't like it, and I want to change it. So that is going to be the V2 hybrid. So I'm going to use the V2 hybrid in this one. Then I'm going to use the V3 hybrid in my ICS ARC, and I'm going to upgrade this ARC with a MOSFET and some internal upgrade parts from Mastermods. So the V3 is going into this one. The ETU++, I don't have a G&G rifle myself. Elisa has her G&G ARP9, so maybe we're gonna change this and see how it works, but I have to ask her if it's possible to do that, because it's her rifle. So this one might go into a G&G ARP9, and then the AB++ is going to go in my M1919A4. I'm gonna put it right here because I just think it's an awesome rifle. So there you go. So this is going to go in there, because I will show you what MOSFET there is in this one right now. Not complaining, because back in the days this was an amazing thing. Thank you, Blarock, for making it, but maybe it's time to go a little bit deeper and better. And as I said, I will make different videos about every installation, so I will show you how the process is done. Now, as a conclusion, I must say that I'm really curious on how this is going to work. I'm going to put this stuff inside my rifles, and I hope I don't break it. Now, another thing that was really interesting on my trip there to Perun, I had the chance to talk about some future projects about what is in the pipeline for Perun, I'm not able to tell you, but I can say it's really interesting. I laughed and I loved what they were doing with the new stuff, and I can't wait for you guys to find out also. And that brings us to the end of the Perun MOSFET video, and I hope that this was as interesting for you as it was for me, but I will be wishing you a very good evening, and I'll see you next week for a new video. Bye!